Hello, and welcome to this series of podcasts on Gordie Gillespie, who many of us believe was the greatest coach of all time. I hope that these conversations with players and friends of Gordie will help illuminate Gordie's greatness. But more importantly, I hope we can learn how Gordie did it. He was the winningest collegiate baseball coach of all time and the greatest Illinois high school football coach of all time. But we're not interested in his secrets of winning games, but his secrets of winning the hearts, minds, and the development of his young athletes. Dan Sharp played for Gordie at Joliet Catholic, then became a teacher and a football coach himself after Gordie retired from Joliet Catholic. Dan then became one of the greatest Illinois high school football coaches of all time, winning 6 championships. Dan has a unique perspective of Gordie in that he played for Gordie, coached under Gordie, and then, since Gordie helped Dan win several of those championships, Dan had Gordie as an unofficial assistant coach. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I have an incredible, genuine pleasure of chatting with one of the greatest high school football coaches, certainly not only in Illinois history, but in the history of the country, and Dan Sharp from Joliet Catholic Academy. Just to show you his resume, Dan was just admitted into his 4th Hall of Fame, the National Athletic Coaches Hall of Fame. And Dan, what an incredible honor that is. I just read the other people who were in this, and talk about a who's who of coaching. It's all sports, and I looked up his record just to show you. Here's Dan's biography. I'm not going to read everything, but Dan played for Gordie at Joliet Catholic, and then became an assistant with Gordie, and then became head coach at Joliet Catholic after serving as a high school football coach. And just to show you, if you look up the record, this is absolutely incredible. Dan won 6 championships in 9 years. Now, folks, there's over 1,500 high schools in Illinois. The dominance of basically 2 schools. Joliet Catholic has 14 championships. Mount Carmel, I think, has 13 now, and New Lenox has something like 10. One of those schools has 9. They're the top 4 schools. No other school has more than 6. And here Dan got 6 in 9 years. That compares with Gordie getting 5 in 8 years. Between the 2 of them, you look it up, Dan is 39th in the history of Illinois in the number of wins. Right below him, at 40th, is Gordie with 222. I think Dan is 223. And Gordie is 222. Between the 2 of them, in that span of about 20 years, I did a real quick analysis right before this. I think they had by far the most wins between the 2 of them. But then you had, who was it? Bob Stone and Winter also had just tremendous records. So the dominance of Joliet Catholic in Illinois is absolutely phenomenal. So Dan, it is just such a pleasure. I've talked to Gordie and Joan about you so much, and they hold you up on the highest of pedestals. So let me start, Dan, because I have something, there was so much else I wanted to share with you first, but I want to get into this conversation because I'm dying to hear this full story, because Dan just mentioned it offhand last week, that a conversation you had with Gordie when you played for him.
Yes. And first of all, Ray, I want to thank you very much for inviting me to come on. I think this is a wonderful podcast. Gordie has meant so much to so many people. For you to get his story out, it means so much to everyone. I know that knew Gordie, and it's going to bring a whole nother generation of people to maybe see what a great coach and what a great man, and the generosity and love that he showed. That those were always his strengths.
Gee, Dan, thank you, because that you hit the nail on the head. I'm looking for a new generation of people who can understand who Gordie was, what he did, and we can copy it, so to speak. So thank you. What a beautiful way to put that. Appreciate it.
And you look good in your brown today. Your brown.
I got gold and brown.
The Hilltopper and the St. Francis colors. When grade school kids would come visit, our school to decide if they want to go to Joliet Catholic. When I'd look at them, and as soon as they leave, I'd say, "Boy, you look good in brown." And Ray, you look good in brown.
Well, that's the only color I
know
look
you like that Temple maroon, but you look good in brown too. But yeah, yes, when the title that you have for this, what at the end of the bench, the player at the end of the bench, that was me. I was a player at the end of the bench. I used to joke, and people ask me, "Well, what did you play at Joliet Catholic?" And I'd say, I played end, guard, and tackle. I sat at the end of the bench. I guarded the water bucket and tackled anybody that got near it.
What a great line. I want you to steal that one. I want to come there.
And I got into 3 games my senior year, but I love the game and I love.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I hate to cut you off. You got into 3 games in your senior year. Yeah. And you became one of the greatest Illinois high school football coaches of all time. That is incredible. But go ahead. Wow.
Well, but I think the reason I was able to get into coaching was, I love the game of football, and I really loved my coach. And I knew that he loved me because after late in the season, and back then we didn't have the playoffs when we played, back in the old days. We ended in October. And as I'm walking off the field, Gordie comes up to me and says, "Dan, I think you could be a pretty good coach. Did you ever think of going into teaching and coaching?" And that's all I needed. I used to listen to Gordie. When I wasn't in the game, Gordie always had a thing he said to all of us: "If you're not in the game," and then he would point to his head and say, "You're in the game." You're always thinking the game. So when Gordie coached, I watched how he coached every position. I watched how he worked with his coaching staff, and I was intrigued by it. And I felt it was a way for me to stay close to the game. And by him telling me that was all I needed. That was the motivation I needed, that this man who I revered and loved so much and looked up to saw something in me that maybe I didn't see in me. And I remember when I'm getting ready to go to college, I went to Illinois Benedictine College in Lisle. It was St. Procopius, and now it's Benedictine. And I went there because it was an excellent teaching school. And of course, Gordie and one of my defensive coaches, Chris Ward, recommended me going there. And so I tell my parents, are like, "Well, what are you going to study? What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I think I want to be a teacher and a coach." And they go, "Really?" And my mom says, "Why is that?" And I said, "I hope someday I can make a kid feel about himself the way Gordie made me feel about myself." And that's, you can't, the way he motivated you was always through enthusiasm, through love, and he never gave up on anybody, even if you sat at the end of the bench. And that resonates with me, and that was always my purpose. And when things weren't going well, I could pick up the phone, and just his voice would remind me and reassure me that through the years, as you know, Ray, staying close friends with Gordie through the years, you get that 5-minute phone call from Gordie, and you can conquer the world. And he always did that. So that's kind of how I got the start in coaching. And when I did get in coaching, everybody says the pressure at Joliet Catholic. I didn't want to let him down. 2 people I never wanted to let down was my father and Gordie. And so I wanted him to see that he's something he could be proud of, watching our kids play.
Dan, I pardon me, but I'm taking notes on what you just said, because there's so much that I really want to follow up on in what you just took a couple of minutes to say. In fact, that last thing that you said, you didn't want to let him down. So I've interviewed maybe 30 or 40 of his former athletes out of the 2,200. And I really want to continue doing this because, this book is just my story. And there's probably 2,200 stories out there. And you've got this beautiful story. But one of the constant themes, Dan, is that players would say that all the time. Tom Thayer, the all-pro, an icon, a historical icon in Chicago, playing for the Bears, said the same thing to me. I never wanted to let Gordie down. And here you got into 3 games, and yet he made this incredible impact on you that you didn't want to let him down. How did he do this? This is what I'm trying to capture. And you gave us a great window into that. So you said you listened to Gordie. When I was talking to Pat Sullivan, I told him that one day after baseball practice, my freshman year, everybody else is in the showers, and he says, I'm going to teach you how to catch that low outside curveball on the low outside corner, like this instead of like this. All right, catch it. And he threw balls at me, and I want to go in and take a shower. I can't do this. And the balls are hitting me in the head, and maybe the 15th pitch, I went, and that one pitch has remained with me the rest of my life, because I saw that this guy's one of the, I didn't know it at the time because I was a kid. I was 18 years old. This is one of the smartest people I've ever met, because I looked at that and I said, yeah, an umpire can't possibly not call that a strike, because I'm showing it to him right here. See, here's the ball. And that turned me into an athletic catcher, but it also taught me how to use my brain in terms of athletics, which I never made that connection before. So not only we listened to him, didn't we?
Yes, without a doubt. I was captivated by everything he would say, and learn. And I think he had a certain approach, the way he would use the language. He made it, the things he said, even used sense of humor, you couldn't forget. He was able, even players or students who don't retain material very well, you never forgot what Gordie said or how he said it, whether he was animated or whether his enthusiasm or whether he was angry or whether there was a way he knew exactly how to get his point across and get your attention doing it.
Can you think of a specific example? I hate to put you on the spot, but
well, I remember a couple things. I remember him using his sense of humor to get the guy's attention, and something we never forgot. We were practicing for St. Francis over at Garnsey Park, and right next door is the St. Joe Cemetery, and we were struggling. We were having a bad week of practice. Gordie's frustration was building. He was trying to maintain his patience. And he finally said, guys, I've had it. He goes, I'm tired of yelling at you every day. He goes, you better start paying attention to the right. He goes, I yelled so much, and he points to the cemetery and says, I yelled so much, 3 of those guys got up and left.
No, pardon me, but Pat Sullivan told almost the same story. but this is how Gordie got to you. You're right.
And so when guys started to let it down, they'd go, hey, Gordie's going to send some more of those guys home. Don't pick it up. But he just, for example, he can achieve discipline when he wants without even the person. He doesn't even have to yell it. He was coaching baseball at St. Francis, and they're down in Texas, and they had a rain out. So a couple of the boys decided to take the van and visit a couple of establishments in Texas, down in Arlington. They were both third basemen. They come back, and they miss the morning breakfast meeting. So now they're rained out. It's like 100 degrees humidity and 100% humidity down there. And Gordie has a short practice, that he says, the 2 third basemen, we need to work on some run throughs. He said they're in the parking lot at Arlington Stadium. They're in the parking, so it's a huge parking lot. He had the manager play first base, and Gordie sat on a bucket, and he rolled Kinko balls, and the guys had to do run throughs. And then he told them, if you miss the first baseman, you have to sprint and catch the ball. So the one kid said to the other lad, he says, I'll pay you $20 to overthrow the manager because they need a break. Never yelled at him about being out. Never said a word about it. They said they went back and they slept from 1 o'clock all the way to the next morning meeting. They said, we So that was like his number 2 discipline. He achieved discipline without calling those kids out. He just had them stay after for a few run throughs.
That's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Rick Baranek told me the great story, very similar to that. When he was down in Texas, and he played in the 70s during the great run when Gordie won 3 straight national championships. And he said they lost a few games in the beginning of their Southern tour, and everybody was dejected. And they're playing Florida, and they had a lead going into the 5th. They get 2 outs, 2 strikes on the batter, and it starts raining. And and they're all depressed because if it rains, it'll be no decision. And Gordie slowly walked out to the mound, Bear says. Everybody's wondering, why is he doing this? Why is he talking to the pitcher when it's starting to rain? And he looked up at the sky. And Bear says, and he put his finger up like that, and it stopped raining. The next guy in the next pitch popped out. We won the game, and then it downpoured. So we knew he was God, so we listened to him, everything he said. But there are other things that he did, as you're pointing out, where we just felt compelled to listen to him. Tony Delgado and I would fight to get, as freshmen, to fight on a trip to get in his car just to listen to him. So when you said that, you listened to him. That's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, he was a great teacher all the time. He never stopped teaching. You're in the car and he's driving, he's drawing plays on the windshield while he's driving. He's talking about the next game. He's talking about how something we did in one game will carry over. It was a bigger picture. It just wasn't for that one game, but it's going to carry over a period of time as we go on. He's setting up future opponents. So he was amazing to listen to, Ray. You're right. It was very captivating.
All right, I just wrote that down too. So you said, this is fascinating. And you said that he would see something in one game, but that he would carry it over to later in the season.
Yes. And
yet here you are, you're about 18 years old. You're essentially the kid at the end of the bench.
Yep.
All right. I wrote that down. That's beautiful. Anyway, he sees 10 years beyond us. So not only did he see from this game carrying it over to the end of the season, but he saw in Dan Sharp greatness. He saw how phenomenal you can be. You were going to become a great teacher. So not only did you watch him, but he was watching you.
Yes. Oh, that is great, right? What you just said, because
Think of that.
Every kid he coached.
Every kid he coached. If he coaches you, a kid who, as a senior, only gets into 3 games, he's watching everybody.
He's not coaching you for that sport.
Exactly.
He's coaching you for the rest of your life.
For the rest of your life.
And the things you learn in his sport, he wants you to carry into whatever endeavor. And I saw that as a player, and I really saw this as assistant coach, being around him and how he saw, like you said, greatness in each kid and tried to bring it out, but let them realize that they can do much more. They can go beyond their own expectations. And, what a talent that was, and the gift that he had to motivate you to do it, you know. And then you put on top of it the intelligent coach that he is, as you were saying, you know, about the catching and every football. Like, I never played football, but no one had better fundamentals. No one did the little things better than Joliet Catholic when he coached them, and that's why they won. He beat teams with much more talent. Yeah. They were never better coached. You know, so you combine it all together, and what a unique, wonderful person. And then you throw in his generosity and his love. it just they don't make them like that anymore, you know. And we need more people like Gordie. We need more Gordies. The great thing is that Gordie, all the kids he taught are his legacy as his coaching tree, and they can continue to do those things that Gordie taught us, that we could teach other kids, and hopefully keep this. What Gordie did. Gordie's the butterflies that created the tsunamis. He was the butterfly wings.
Wait a minute. Butterfly that created the tsunami.
the butter,
Yeah.
pie flap in his
What a
lap.
great line. Holy cow. I love that. That's written down for posterity. This gets back to what we were just talking about, Dan, that you so eloquently put, that what I'm trying to do is to reach out to a whole nother generation to say, well, here's the great model to follow. We can't be as good as him. I mean, you came very close to equaling his records at Joliet Catholic. And I'm betting that you have come very close. My last chapter in the book, chapter 10, is Pass It On. That's what Tipping McFadden said to me in 1969. When I said, I can't take this job. He wanted me to come and coach with Gordie, and he was offering me 20% less than I was already making with Lyle. I said, I got 2 babies. I can't do it. You have to offer me 20 or 30% more because you're asking me to work 5 times as hard, teach and coach with Gordie. But anyway, I felt terrible saying no. And he said, Ray, the way to thank Gordie for what he's done for you is not to buy him a present, because I was said, should I buy him a tie or something? To say I felt miserable saying no to him. And then my 3 best friends, Tony Delgado, Pat Sullivan, and Tom Kennedy, all took the position coaching with him. You took the position coaching with him. And, I'm very jealous that you guys, and Tipping McFadden said to me that he was in the same office with Gordie for 10 years. Oh my goodness, how wonderful that must have been. But Tipping McFadden looks to me in the eye and he says, Ray, take what Gordie taught you and pass it on. And that's what I've been doing the rest of my life. And I'll bet you have become close to, I bet you've taken things that he taught you as a player and then maybe as an assistant and done the same thing.
I certainly tried. I certainly tried it. Look at all the people like yourself who got into education, who got into coaching, just so that they could work with young people and make a positive impact. And if I didn't play for Gordie, I don't know what I'd be doing right now. I really don't. I don't know if I'd been the coach or an athletic director or whatever, but he's the one that set me on the path. As you said, he saw something in each of us. And again, so we don't let him down, we will pass it on.
Yeah. You mentioned something there, a Gordie tree. That's a beautiful model. Describe that for me. What do you mean by that?
I just try to visualize all the people Gordie coached and taught that went into education and coaching. And then how many of their players and students went into education and coaching? And how many of their players and students went on? Just in our little world here in Joliet, my last year coaching at Joliet Catholic, from my freshman level on up, we probably had about 16 coaches total. One coach, there's only one coach, no, every coach on our staff, every single one, either played for Gordie or played for me at Joliet Catholic, every single one. And we had guys that went to Morris High School, which is a rival of Joliet Catholic, but he played for Gordie at St. Francis, ended up coming back to Joliet Catholic because, we did have Gordie come back and help us at the time, be a consultant, come on the practice field. And I think there was a dad that played in the 80s, and his son was coming to Joliet Catholic. And he saw Gordie out there with a straw hat, and he's yelling at the quarterbacks to carry their fakes out, and he's got his, his hands are going, and he's, Gordie is animated, and he's making a point, and in his early 80s, and you're like, where does he get the energy? And this dad goes, he had tears in his eyes, right? He had tears, and he goes, I never thought my son could experience Gordie. Wow. I'm so glad when I, played for Gordie, now my son can see what I talk about when I talk about Gordie. And so I always felt that I ain't gonna come close to Gordie, but the way he did things, what you tried to instill in kids, I tried to emulate that as best as I could. And my staff understood. So all those guys understood where we were coming from. Because we tried to carry Gordie's, 10 Commandments or Gordie's coaching staff protocol, all these things we tried to carry over because that's who we are. We came from Gordie. He was the original when he started at Joliet Catholic in the 50s. And it's branched out. And that's why we're successful, because everybody that he has coaches, people who come back have been able to continue that and pass that on. So hopefully our kids are getting the experience that we had when we played for them.
That's a beautiful, beautiful story. So I'm starting to write the
I love the
Gordie
legal
trees. You got
family.
Gordie here, then you got Dan, and you got me, and you got Sully and Tom Kennedy, Tony Delgado, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what you've got is 2,200 branches reaching out from Gordie. And then Dan coached all of these guys. And you have a father whose son played for Dan, who's learning about Gordie. This is what it's all about. This is what we want to do. We want to project this idea. So you're engendering so many thoughts in my head. It's amazing. I remember talking to Gordie, and he says, Ray, if you coach well, he says, by the way, he said, if you got a set of golf clubs in your trunk, get out. I don't want golf clubs in your trunk. So anyway, I remember a conversation that I hadn't thought about in years, but you just engendered. Namely, he said, you've got to talk to every kid every day. He says, Joe Heinz was in his 70s when he was my pitching. He was the first guy there at a 6 o'clock practice, and he greeted everyone with a smile, just like that beautiful smile I bet you did the same thing, because that's what it's all about. You're happy to be there. That's what he says in his 10 commandments. He says, you've got to be happy to be there. And if you're having a bad day, forget about it. Leave the bad day over there. But when you're on the field, you're having a great day.
Yep.
And I said, but Gord, you had like 60 players in football. You couldn't have talked to them every day. He said, I had seven or eight assistants. And after practice, we would get together, and every single assistant had to say hello to every player and say, how are you doing? Here's another incredible parallel. Rudiger. Mm-hmm. Gordie somewhere back in the, I don't know, it must have been in the 90s, somewhere in there. He said, well, call Rudy. The movie had just come out, in my defense. He says, call Rudy. And I said, Gord, Rudy who? He says, Rudy of the movie. I said, what movie? He says, there's a new movie out called Rudy. So I called Rudy up. And you have to, at the time, he was not making 30 grand per speech. Right? Yeah. So it's easy to call him. Now it's a lot harder to call him. And, but he said exactly the same thing as you. He says, I played well at Joliet Catholic, but I would get beat up every game. I was so small, but I wanted to play for Notre Dame. And Rudy was walking down the street, his good friend. It's kind of in the movie. They changed it in the movie because his friend's actual death, you probably know the story, was too gross. And so they made it in a steel factory or something like that. It was quite dramatic. And he said what actually happened wasn't in the movie. Is he was walking down the street and he saw Gordie up on a ladder painting his house. And he says, Coach, he said, hi, Rudy. And Rudy's in his 20s now, because he'd served about, I think, 4 years in the Navy. And he said, I'm thinking of going to South Bend and maybe get into Notre Dame. And I said to Gordie, did you think he had any chance of getting into Notre Dame? He graduated third in his class from the bottom. He says, no, there's no way he could have gotten into Notre Dame. But I knew if he stayed here. No, just what you just said, Gordie saw 10 years ahead of where we would sit. Yeah. He says, I knew that young man had greatness in him. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I saw him on the football field, and I saw what he could become. He saw Dan Sharp on the football field, and he saw who Dan Sharp could be in the same way that he saw that in Rudy. And he says, Rudy, you go there. And when you get into Notre Dame, you knock those All-Americans on their keisters. And I mean, okay. And Rudy said to me, and this is before he became this phenomenal. I don't know have you ever heard Rudy speak?
Oh, yes, I have.
I think
his brother's my strength coach.
Oh, really? Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, they told me, he told me that when someone would call him, and he was in grade school, and they'd say, "Can I speak with Rudy?" Because if you don't know it, you know it. But if someone listening doesn't know it, there were 14 kids. There were 7 boys, 7 girls. Rudy was the oldest boy. I think he was the 3rd kid. And so he's got all these brothers. And the last name Rudiger was so hard to pronounce, they just called him Rudy. And so when someone would call up and they'd answer, they said, "Can I speak to Rudy?" And the person would say, "Which grade is he in?" And the person calling would say, "You don't even know what grade your brother's in?" So I talked to his mother once at a fundraiser in Las Vegas, and I asked her, and she said, "Oh yeah, that's what we did." I said, "I can't believe it." So this is well before he became Rudy now, icon, a Notre Dame icon. So I'm talking to him. He says, it was Gordie saying that, "You can do it," that gave me the impetus. He says, "I just moved to South Bend." And then the rest of the story it's only slightly covered in the movie. And I said to him, "Is it a true story?" He says, "Look, it's a little over an hour. Can you put your life in an hour?" Of course not. So I've glossed over a number of things. But it was Gordie seeing Rudy becoming something that he didn't quite see. With Dan Sharp, he saw that you could become a coach. And all the other things that he had built almost a pyramid for Dan Sharp. He was teaching all of this stuff down here. And you didn't know you were learning it.
No.
To become a coach, but he saw it. And he says, "Dan, maybe you can become a coach." He did the same thing for me, Dan, because there was no way I was going to graduate school. Now, he and Tippy were reasons why I became a virtual straight A student. I was a C student in high school. But anyway, he saw something in me that I didn't see. And he kept saying, "Have you applied to graduate school?" So he's seeing way beyond where I am. This is absolutely remarkable what you're bringing up. So how many, you must have taken what he taught you as a coach, and how did you apply that? How did you, were you a high school coach before you were Gordie's assistant, or was it the other way?
I was, I coached 1 year, taught 1 year at Lamont High School right out of college. I was 21 years old. I got ripped after a year. I was getting married. The Carmelite father, Father Dave Simpson, was marrying us. And he called me and says, Joliet Catholic has a math opening. Give Father Bob Colorisi a call. So I called Father Bob. And I also talked to Gordie prior. Gordie said, "I got a position for you on the football. We'll get you." He was excited and I was excited, a chance maybe to be able to coach in Gordie's program, So I go to Joliet Catholic. I put on this sport coat and tie, and I sit down for my interview. And Father Bob goes, "So we're going to have you teach freshman algebra, geometry, and junior algebra." I said, "Okay." And he goes, "You're going to coach freshman football, Gordie." I said, "Yes." And you put that down. He goes, "And you're going to wrestling or basketball?" I said, "No, I don't think." He goes, "No, you're going to coach either wrestling or basketball. Which one is it?" I go, "Basketball." Sign. He goes, "Sign here." I signed. And next 7 years, I was Joliet Catholic with Gordie. Then I went over to St. Francis with Gordie for the next 14 years. I went to Minooka for 4 years. It was kind of to see if that's when I became first time head coach was at Minooka. Gordie, I think, coached 1 more year of football at St. Francis after I went to Minooka, and was very much a part of it. But I had to see if I could do it, Ray. I had to see if I could be a head coach. You don't know. Sometimes guys are great assistant coaches.
Right? Oh yeah.
And I saw the work Gordie had to do to be successful. I knew, and he did things with me when I was an assistant, especially at St. Francis. He'd say, "Dan, we're having a clinic at Joliet Junior College, and the whole morning session is going to be on our offense." I said, "That's great, Coach." He says, "You need to be there about 8:30. You're speaking the whole morning." I said, "Me?" He goes, "Yeah, you know the offense, don't you? You're speaking, So he was preparing me for public speaking. Then he says, "Dan, we're going to interview with the local cable company. We're going to talk about St. Francis football." I said, "Good, Coach." I said, I'll be sure to watch." He goes, No, you're going on the show." I go, "What?" He goes, "Yeah." Giving me the confidence to get in front of the media and answer questions. He saw that, okay, he's going to be a head coach someday. And then I would sit with him for out. We would have a Monday. He would have me come over to his house at 6:30 in the morning. And he said, Joan's going to have donuts and coffee for us. And we sit down and we start putting the game plan together for the week before our Monday walkthrough. And he'd say, what do you think? I said, what about this play? I'd say $30. And he would stop and goes, why do you want to run it against this defense? Now, what if this defense shifts to here? This is what we saw him doing. What's your adjustment? It was tedious. It was, but detail. He was so, everything had to be, and he made me think through everything like a good teacher does. He didn't, give me the answer. He wanted to see how I thought through it and what my process was. And then he'd say, and so we're not even halfway through the game plan. He goes, now Joan is going to serve us a nice bowl of soup for lunch. and we're racing to St. Francis for the walkthrough. We get done about 2:00 with the game. And I'm like, I'm exhausted mentally. But it was the best time of my life because I learned how to work. I learned how to prepare. I learned how to look at film. I learned how to speak in public. He threw me into the recruiting. I got to meet so many high school coaches through recruiting for St. Francis and so many. So I was not a confident person. I was a pretty shy person. But he not only coached me in football and to be a coach, but he taught me how I can go out and express myself in the world. And those are the things that I'm so grateful for. And at the time, they were kind of painful, but he knew. And again, we get back to the point where you didn't want to disappoint him. I remember one day, it's fall practices just started at St. Francis. We have 2 practice sessions and then a meeting at night with the team. So it's like 3 sessions, and it's grueling. So we got to get up. We got breakfast at 6:30. We got to be on the field at 7. We have a coaches meeting. We got to be on the field at 7:30. Practice starts at 8. Well, we had to take the gear because we had to go 2 miles off campus. We had to drive everything to Pershing Field, and so I'm running late, and so I kind of couldn't finish breakfast at the cafeteria. I grabbed my cup of coffee and I head out. Now, you talked about don't have the golf clubs in the trunk of your car. I walked onto the field with a cup of coffee. And we're stretching and we're doing everything. We greet every kid. They're stretching. Hey, how's everything going? You looking good today? What a great day. And then after the first session, it was like 3.5 hours, coaches meeting, and Gordie has his glasses. He's got a string around his neck, and everybody's sitting in the meeting, it's quiet, and he takes his glasses and he goes, if any one of my coaches walks on the field with a cup of coffee, he'll get fired on the spot. So I was like,
I can see him doing it. I can see the way he delivers it.
And
any coach,
nobody looked at me, but I could just feel like everybody's. Fast forward about 9 years now. I'm at Joliet Catholic. We just won our first state championship. Gordie's speaking for a clinic for USA coaches, and it's a clinic where it's a multi-sport clinic. Yeah. Gordie's speaking Saturday morning at 8. Every other room is dark. All the coaches are going to see Gordie. It's packed. So I bring most of my staff. We get there early, see Gordie. We're giving him a hug and everything, and talking to him. So we sit right in the front row. And Gordie, reading the speech you sent me, Gordie, just bring back all these fun memories. He gets up right away, and it's all about coaching psychology. And he looks out at the crowd and goes, what? He tries, first of all, to wake everybody up. Hey, if do any one of you guys walk on the field with a cup of coffee, you better never walk. What kind of message are you sending to your team? He looks at me and winks. 9 years after that, I was like slumping.
9 years later,
and he
I get seeing beyond.
Yeah, we just won our first state title, and that's how he started the meeting. And everybody's kind of sitting up, putting their coffee down. But his way of sending his message received. If you better hit the field all business. You better your body language is important that first time you step on the field.
Oh, yeah.
If you're walking around casual with a cup of coffee, what message are you sending those players? You know, and
here's how we pass it on. I'm sure you passed that on to your assistants also.
oh yeah,
Yeah. But I just said, here I've been teaching 53 years. I'm going to start after a year and a half of online.
wow.
I'm going to start teaching linear algebra.
Wow.
And I teach critical thinking and problem solving at Temple.
Oh,
I am going to take that story of Gordie Gillespie 9 years later. Now picture me in the front of, I teach large classes, over 100 students. Picture me on the first day of class. Now this is what I mean by passing on. Think of how smart this guy was, this Gillespie guy. I'm going to take what you just said, and I'm going to tell them. I was talking to Dan Sharp. He walked on to practice with a cup of coffee. 9 years later, Gordie Gillespie, any coach of mine, and he wins. So I'm going to look at my linear algebra class, which is a very important class for science majors.
Yeah.
I said, how many of you now have a cup of coffee? And you're taking one of the most important courses you'll ever take in your science career. You got a cup of coffee. Is that what you think of this class? And then I'll laugh and I'll wink at him.
That's exactly how he would say it too.
It's exactly
how he would say it. It stayed with me forever.
Dan, I've got so many things written down that I want to follow up with. But most important, oh my God, your stories are just phenomenal.
I'm sure we all intertwined are probably very similar situations.
I think there's 2,200 guys out there, only in the first level of the tree, but there's probably guys down here also. Paul Babcock told me, yeah, he was the star at St. Francis baseball in '93. And three guys, Gordie, and the two pitchers, I'm forgetting their names now, Ivan, and they all three, they won Coach of the Year, Player of the Year, and MVP of the World Series. They said that Paul Babcock should have won the award. But anyway, Paul was telling me about it. All he wanted to do was coach.
Yeah. And
he became a coach. And then he talked to me about one of his players who went to a junior college. He says, Coach, I want to play like you. And he came back and said, I have to leave. They stink. They're terrible. They're trying to learn tricks. They're not teaching me what you taught me, Coach. And Paul says, wow, maybe I've passed on what Gordie gave me to my players. And that's what you've been doing all these years, Dan. One of the things he said to me, so he was talking about the 10 Commandments. And I had heard the speech twice, in part. I didn't hear the whole thing. So I kind of knew what the speech was all about. And he gave the speech in total to the ABCA, American Baseball Coaches Association, 5,000 coaches. And he said to me that Joan had to push him on the stage because he was going to talk philosophy, and he expected them that they wanted how to throw a better curveball or something like that.
Yeah.
And he says, I feared I was supposed to talk for 45 minutes. And he gave the keynote address to 5,000 coaches, and he thought they'd get up and walk out. Joan had to literally, and Joan nodded, yeah, I did, push him on the stage. He got a 5-minute standing ovation. And one of those commandments you just touched on that I want you to follow up. One of the commandments is patience. So when he said that to me, so we're talking, I said, give me your commandments. I've got most of them. He says, well, I think it's number 6. He says, patience. So patience. What do you mean by patience? Now, this is one of the most abstract ideas. Gordie, one of the things you're emphasizing to me is something that Pat Sullivan said to me a while ago. He said, Gordie was really smart. I never put it in that perspective, but he was one of the smartest guys I've ever met.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
absolutely. But anyway, patience. Let me ask you this. Let me put you on the spot. What do you think Gordie meant by patience?
I think one, I don't think he reacted to a situation, especially if a student makes a mistake or a player makes a mistake, whether he gets in trouble with community or law. He never gave up on kids. He would take a moment, and instead of cutting that kid loose, he would try to teach him to make better choices, to let him know that there's unconditional love that he has for him, and that he believes in him. And it may take a while for that young man to come around, but he was going to stay with them until a point where maybe he never would come around. But he had the patience to work with people, especially his players, his students, to never give up on them. And that's how I saw that with, we had a young man named, a young man that played for Gordie. Darren Hunter was his name. He came from Chicago, and Gordie recruited him. He was playing at Moraine Valley, and he called his house, and Darren Hunter's mom goes, "Who is it?" He goes, "I don't know, some old white guy singing my high school fight song," because he went to Lang Tech where his brother Earl went, and he's singing the fight song to him. Well, the mom ended up saying, "You're going there," but Darren, I don't think, really wanted to. Darren got in a little bit of trouble. So one summer, Gordie says, "You're going to stay." And he always missed weight, Ray. Remember Gordie with weight? You had to come in shape. You had to make your weight. He was
Absolutely
a stickler on that.
Oh yeah.
One of our big offensive tackles, and he always missed weight. So he got in a little trouble back home. Gordie said, "You're not going home this summer. I got you a job." He got him a job with Crowther Roofing, and it was the hottest summer on record in Joliet. He's on the roof working all summer. He says, "The first year I made weight." He says, "But I made money. I helped, because Gordie actually lent him money to, for a lawyer and stuff. He paid Gordie back. He became an All-American football player. He graduated from Joliet. He graduated from St. Francis.
Beautiful.
Went on to be a security guard at Stateville Penitentiary. And then he came back and coached freshmen with me.
Oh.
And he would have the freshmen, and he would, every year, the first day of practice, he'd get them all together, and he'd tell them the story. His story was, "I could have ended up on the other side of the bars." Because he was
wow. Oh, man. Oh, I got to write that down.
He said, "At 14 years old, I was very close to being on the others." He goes, "And then when I got into college, there was a man that put me on the right path, and he did it through football." He said, so he's telling these kids this is more than football. And he's telling them about Coach Gillespie, how his way of discipline, but his patience with Darren. Again, seeing that greatness, his patience of bringing him along, putting him in situations where he knew he could be successful. Darren comes back. Now, Darren's son played at Joliet Catholic. Darren's son just got his doctorate. He graduated from Xavier, he just got his doctorate.
You talk about pass it on. Gordie gave it him, and then he passed it on to his own son.
When he got in trouble, how many coaches would have said you're off the team?
Oh, absolutely.
He got in trouble with the law back home. I said, get off the team. Look what
absolutely.
Look the contribution that this man has given to society, because Gordie had the patience to work with him and saw something good in him. And his name was Darren. Gordie called him Bill. He had no idea why Gordie called him Bill. And Gordie said, "Because you're an ounce away." He said, "You're an ounce away from being the same weight as William the Refrigerator Perry." He said, "I was so afraid to get on that scale every year." And he tells that in his stories, And he's still working with our freshmen now. His son.
Really? Oh, I have to talk to him. Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah, and he's in charge of a group of security guards. He stayed with that tough job all his life, and remarkable man.
That's one of the most riveting stories. I know so many Gordie stories, but that's one of the most riveting. That's beautiful, Dan.
But if he didn't have patience with him, look at how a lot of things could have changed. He wouldn't have a son that's a doctor. He wouldn't have touched the lives of all these kids. He would, what he did with the prisoners and the guards. Just so much that this guy did. Because Gordie didn't cut him loose. I could have been on the other side of the bars.
That's an incredible line.
And so those, I think, are one of many stories of Gordie. I just have to be there to witness that one, and be part of it. And because of Gordie's patience in him, the person he was, I asked him to come back and coach our kids because I saw how he responded with Gordie. And I felt very confident he could, and then what he's done for our program is, I couldn't ask for more.
But what an incredible.
With the new coach, he's still coaching, yeah.
what an incredible message you just gave. Not just to coaches, but everyone, but especially coaches. Gordie said, I was with him in Gaithersburg, Maryland or something, and he was giving a talk to loads of coaches. And in his spare time, he would give these talks like he had spare time. And so, I was taping him. So remember, I said I had bits and snatches of that great speech he gave to the ABCA, where he got the standing ovation. So and it wasn't a great videotape, so I can't use it on the website, but I garnered an awful lot from it. And I garnered the way he would become Elmer Gantry, so to speak. And he would go like this, even in his talks, just as you said, about the cup of coffee. But he said, and I'm gonna ask you this. Again, you almost cherish being put on the spot, so I hope you don't mind me doing it again. Gordie said, because I have to get back to patience too. Gordie said that the athletic field is the greatest classroom there is. And I'm sitting there with my little camera, taping this. Shows you how long ago we don't tape things anymore. But I'm taping it. And I'm sitting there saying, well, why is your athletic field better than my math classroom? And then he explained. What do you think he meant?
I think a couple things, at least what I get. One, the guys are putting on the line for each other in a lot of cases.
Exactly.
The responsibility they have, and the more responsibility he gives them in the team, the more that they're going to prepare and learn. That there's no room for failure, because failure will end up losing a game. You know, so the whole thing is the atmosphere that you're not only trying to learn the information, learn the skills for yourself, but you're doing it for the greater good for the whole group. And if you fail, we all fail. And I felt that was a motivation. And
he talks about team pride, and that's one way he teaches.
And I remember always saying, if you cannot be a good coach and be a poor classroom teacher. He used to tell us this all the time. In order for you to be a good coach, you must be an excellent classroom teacher.
Wow.
If one kid in your class gets an F, he didn't fail, you failed.
Wow.
Teaching. And we couldn't have on the field one kid get an F. You know, I mean, what everybody had to, so I think it was part of that motivation of the classroom, because there's so much more to go. You could do so much more with kids. You can be more hands-on. You can do a lot. Putting them in positions where they can be successful. Sport of football, obviously, there's so many different types of positions. He could find where your skills could give you an opportunity to help the team be successful, and how you can improve and be. And everybody felt like they had ownership in the team. They felt part of the team. He would come in at halftime. He'd ask the players, how's that guy playing over you? Where is he? What are they? And they would have to answer his questions. And then he would use their answers to adjust the plays for the second half.
Wow.
So now the first time you're getting, you're being asked by coach, what are they doing? And then he's saying, oh, okay, this is what we're going to do. Well, you better pay attention. You better be prepared, because he's going to, you're going to give it back. You're going to give back what he taught you, and you're going to give him information that he can use to help win the football game. And so I think that's how maybe in the football field or the baseball diamond, to be a place where I taught both. And I do enjoy coaching on the field more than the classroom setting. I like the action. I like, that the feeling of coaching. I felt sometimes I could do more in that classroom than maybe I could in the traditional classroom.
That is an absolutely brilliant, and I mean that in all sincerity. It's a brilliant description of why he says that the ball field's the greatest classroom. I thank you for that. And he touched on a number of the points you brought up. And one of the things, and again, all I'm doing is paraphrasing your beautiful description, is that He's in the ball because I asked him that. And I called him up right after that. And I said, why do you say that? And one of the things I had never thought of before, he said, fear of failure. What you just said in the classroom, if the kid gets an F, you failed, teacher. Don't just say the kid failed. You failed. Well, that's kind of what a good coach brings to the athletic field. I'm going to put you, my players, in these situations where you might fail. And I'm going to be there for you. Yep. And I'm going to help you out. Yep. Yeah, how many times have players called Gordie and said, Gord, I'm 35 years old and I something in my life just failed. Tom Kennedy said to me many, many years ago once, he says, never a day goes by when I don't ask myself, what would Gordie do in this situation? So all those messages, that pyramid I was talking about with you earlier, all those messages he gave to each and every one of us lives in our hearts and in our brains, as you just said. We're learning from him. And it helps us in everyday life. Yeah. All right, now listen to this. He told me, I was having lunch with Pat Sullivan and a friend of his who I just met for the first time. And this guy says to me, oh, that Gillespie, he was a great coach, but man, he was kind of crazy. He would go for it on 4th and 1 in his own territory.
Yes.
Now, why do you think he went for it?
I tell you right.
Rockford Boylan, right?
Rockford Boylan.
By the way, that's chapter
Ray,
2.
I had this written down for number 10. Yeah. I had Rockford Boylan down.
That's chapter 2. I tell that whole story. When I read that, I said, this has got to go in the book. What an incredible story that is.
And I even use some of this stuff when I spoke at clinics. Now, listen to this. I use it when I spoke at clinics on the special teams. Now, we're talking going for 4th and 1 in the biggest game ever. And now we're going to talk about special teams in relation to that, which probably makes no sense. One, first of all, he believed he can get it. He always had a thing like, you really find the measure of a man on 4th and 1, whether you're going to get it or whether you're going to stop him. He thought the game came down to that.
Yeah.
Whole great game with all this strategy and all that. It came down to 4th and 1, whether on offense or whether on defense. Well, he's on his own 18-yard line, Ray. His own 18. The biggest game of the year. We're in the 4th quarter.
Were you on that team?
No, my brother was.
Your brother was, okay.
I was in college, but I came back for the game.
You came back for it, okay. And you're living and dying up in the stands.
I'm in the stands.
And you're saying, what's he doing?
I did, Ray.
Sure. The quarterback, Pesavento, said to me, I'm sure Gordie lost count of what down it is. And then I remembered who I'm playing for, and he went, so go ahead, this is great.
Well, Fair's going to get a yard, right?
Yeah.
They shot the gap, so they got the bag. And Fair did Rick there also coaches with me here. And
Rick is on your staff? Oh,
yeah.
Wow. I have to talk to Rick too.
He coaches on our freshman staff too. And he to this day, he says he got it. He said it was a bad spot. It's always a bad spot. I got it. So Gordie then, the game goes on. They only have to go 18 yards. They scored a first touchdown. We're getting beat 7-0. Get the ball back with 5 minutes left, deep in our own line, like about the 20 or 18-yard line. And they move down the field and score. Twice they went for it on 4th down in that drive. We got it. We talk about those guys want to talk about the time he didn't get it, but he got it twice on 4th down, going in, and then goes for 2, which is like 4th. It's worse than 4th and 1 because
because that is the game. You're right.
It's the game. There's like 1:30 left, and he gets the 2-point conversion. And when I started coaching with Gordie would run a quick kick where they'd line up like they're in their offensive formation, and the quarterback would run out and they'd snap it to the tailback who would punt it. And they would do that on 3rd down. Gordie says, everybody criticizes that play. He said, with that play, I now own the psychology of 4th down. Every single team that we play will not know if we're going to go for it or kick it. Because that crazy SOB went for it at his own 18. He said, my craziness has created a whole thing where now we own 4th down. and it's not like we're going to give the ball back to you automatically. It'd be fourth down, and he quick kick out of fourth down. They had nobody back. They thought he was going for it. And, we gain all that, as Gordie would say, we gain geography and the punt, Most people say yardage, but Gordie says geography, so it sticks with you. And so he made, and then I took that same approach. We've gone for it on fourth down, and I know I was criticized, but it set the stage for the rest of the year that you put the defense on their heels. That is the intelligence of him as a coach, the innovation, how he sees the game and how he projects it down the road. It's amazing to me. The biggest game of the year, Ray. He goes, he's going to go for it anytime.
But he said to me, he trusted the offense that they're going to make it.
Did.
But if they didn't make it, he's going to trust. He's saying to the defense, I trust that you're going to hold them. But also, if you don't hold them, I'm going to trust that the offense will score. So you put all that and look at the team pride. The offensive guys are going to run this play. And Rick got the bad spot. I know he did. They miss it. Pasavento told me that they all, when they were running on the field, I'm going to cry. When they were running on the field, the defense said, it's okay. They're slapping them on the shoulder pads. They're saying, we're going to take over. We're going to do it. Then they didn't do it, the defense. They gave up the touchdown. They exchanged, and every one of those defensive guys came like this, and the offensive guys came up and said, it's okay. We're going to get them. We're going to beat them. I said to Tony Delgado last night, how did he do that? How did he teach team pride? He didn't give a long speech. You've got to look at the guy next to you and take pride. No. And one of the ways he did it was 4th and 1. And he said to me, Ray, this is incredible. So you said to it, I want to take it 10 years down the road. He said, athletics is about putting kids in situations where they might fail and then show them that you trust in them.
Yeah.
And if they fail, it's not the end of the world. You can go on to the next time and make it. So he said, even if we didn't win this game, 2 things, Dan. One, what you just said, I own 4th down. But number 2, it's okay. All the guys on that team, the fans don't get it. The fans are thinking it's crazy. But I bet, look, you're in the stands and you were living and dying with that. Every one of those 60 players or so remembers that play. If I said 4th and 1, they would laugh. Oh, let me tell you about that play. Pasavento, the second time I called Pasavento, the quarterback, he says, you want me to tell you the plays? The first play I handed him off to Boltzower, he got 3 yards. He went through every single play.
Yes.
It's there. They remember this. But here's the key. When Pasavento goes up and he tries to get a promotion and he doesn't get it, or something drastic happens in his life and he fails or life around him fails, what's the first thing that comes up? Gordie Gillespie.
Yep.
Gordie has faith in me. I can go around that and I can do this. I can do that. And his brilliance was unbelievable. And that's what I want to get across, that we coaches can do that. We teachers can do that. Not as well as he did, of course.
Oh,
but we can try. And I love your line, Dan. If that kid gets an F in your class, you fail.
Yeah, and every team that took the field for Gordie believed and knew they were going to win. Every single time. Even if it's the last few minutes of the game and Pasavento says, we got this, we're going to get down the field and score. They always believe in it. And if they don't make it, Gordie always told us, we didn't lose. We ran out of time.
Yeah.
You know, the effort was there. You know, you gave it all you had. Maybe we didn't get on that 4th and 1, but you never quit. And I think that also, that trust, you brought up an excellent point, Ray. It was about the kids trusting him and him trusting the kids, and then the kids trusting each other. When you said the defense was saying, we got this, they trusted each other too. And boy, sometimes it's difficult in today's world to create that level of trust and team, team camaraderie, the team what's best for the team. It's hard in today's world. We could become such an individualized society in a lot of ways. We deal with kids now. If I'm not starting, I'm departing, and Gordie taught that patience, said, okay, you may get your shot down the road, keep working, and so that trust thing was a big part. They did it with a staff. I'm at St. Francis, I'm his assistant, and he one day comes with me and hands me this book by Tiger Ellison. It's on the run and shoot offense. He said, Danny, I want you to read this, and then I want you to see what we can incorporate into our passing game. He gave me like an assignment, like a summer read. So I read the book. It was fascinating. I looked at our offense. I came up with 5 pass routes, okay, that I put in that fit in our offense that were very similar to what Tiger Ellison did and the run and shoot concept. And then he said, okay, now you're going to teach the offensive staff what you did. So I had to put it on the board and teach them and tell them our philosophy doing it. Well, first game of the year, we're in a crucial situation. He calls one of those routes, and we get a first down. And they're in the game plan every week, and he'll call them in a different situation. He felt confident. So I felt that trust, and I also felt, boy, I better prepare and work hard because he's not just, he's going to do what I give him, and it better work. But I felt part of my development. I think he does that with all his coaches, but he does it with all his kids too. That trust.
Yeah, Dan, just to emphasize what you're saying, that trust. Again, you're amazing. You engender so many ideas. But I think I was a freshman. I was on second base, grounded to the third baseman, drops it, tries to pick it up again. He drops it again. I'm saying, oh man, good. And then he picks it up and he looks at me, and I look at Tony, and Tony's on second base. I said, oh, Tony was on first, and the third baseman tags third, and I'm forced out. I forgot to run. I'm thinking nobody's on first. You talk about a mental error. I've got to run right by him. And I've go into the dugout. An 8-year-old would have been chastised for making that error. He was in his rights to scream and holler at me and make an example of Coughlin for losing contact with what's going on. This is why coaches say there's 2 outs. Running the ground ball with this net, watch out for the line drive. They do it every pitch. Well, why? Because players forget. I forgot. I have to run by him. I'm expecting the world to cave in on me. As I'm running by him, expecting him to scream, he pats me on the butt. He looks in quick at the dugout, right next to me, and he looks at Joe Hugo, who's up to bat. He says, "Come on, Joe, you can do it. Didn't say a word. I get into the dugout, and I'm expecting these guys to really, what the hell's wrong with you, guy? What? Yeah. Every one of them came up, hit me on the shoulders. It's okay. Talk about team pride. Yeah. He taught it in one tiny, silent lesson by not saying things. He said, Coughlin was paying attention. He's working his tail off. We'll let him off once. And I knew it was only once. And I knew I never forgot that. And I just paid attention. Like you said, he gave you this book. It's a test. Yep. You let me run by him without saying anything. It was a test. Are you going to learn from this, Coughlin? And he says to the team at the same time, this guy's okay. But the next time he does something like that, that's when we'll all pounce at him and beat the living daylights out of him. But he saw. I want to go back. Let me do one more thing before we sign off, because I've got so many things to talk to you about. Well, I hope we can do this again. Let me go back one more time to patience. You gave an incredibly beautiful explanation of what Gordie meant to him. It's a different perspective than where I thought we were going to go. But what I'd like to do is find out, see if you can see where I'm going with this now. Okay. So part of what he talked about with patience was to have a patience as a coach to repeat and go over that play. All right. Your players are going to be mad at you. They're going to grouse. They're going to do this. Those 2 third basemen that you were talking about were certainly grousing. He must have known when he took that bucket of balls and he's trying to teach me to do this. He must have known I'm mad at him. But he kept throwing that 12th pitch, that 15th pitch. until I got it. He had to have patience with me rather than saying, oh boy, Coughlin's not getting this. We'll go in. And that changed my whole athletic career, that one pitch, believe it or not. Because I said, boy, there's athleticism to learn. So the patience took over. Now, couple that with something you said earlier. He said to you, we're going to a clinic and you're going to speak. And you felt you were shy and he put you on that stage.
Yeah. It was my 4th and 1.
But he had, yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Do you see the connection here? He says, I see Dan in 10, 20 years. He probably saw you in 4 years when you're going to get into all these halls of fame. But he trusted you could do this. And he says, I've got to let him. I mean, he's the clinic guy, and he's giving it over to you.
Yeah.
Look at the patience he had to have.
Yep.
To put you in that situation and the trust. So I've never heard patience and trust go in the same conversation the way he did. And all of a sudden I started thinking about, this is one way that he taught team pride.
Yes.
So he's teaching the whole team. So probably all the other assistants knew that you were going to have, is that true? That knew you were going to have a hard time with this talk.
Oh, yeah.
And how did you feel during that talk? Can you remember?
I prepared. I was a little nervous at first, but once it got going, it was, coaches, it's like you're coaching your team. You're teaching the offense. So once I was able to take off with the clinic and get moving, maybe a few minutes in, I could feel it. It's almost like in football, you say, once you get that first hit, the butterflies are gone, or baseball, once you get your first ball, the butterflies go, or the first pitch. So yeah, the butterflies went away, but he also helped me prepare for it too. It wasn't just like I was going to go in there. He kind of gave me now, this is what we need to talk about in the offense and stress these points. And so he gave me kind of an assignment to do, and I was able to do it and right up by him. So I felt much more confidence going in, but I was still very nervous, right? Just nervous to get up and speak in front of guys that have been coaching for years. You feel sometimes,
Sure, of course.
And then I also know when people go there, expect Gordie to talk.
Here's this guy who's dull and named Sharp. Yeah, wait a minute. All of us have to be going.
What happened to the star? We got the first alternate in there. You go to a play,
the first play,
and the star of the play's not going, and you got the